Hi everybody, I'm Bill Galic and I'll be leading you through the course content in the Introduction to Social Welfare, Social Work 106 in the new semester. I'm very happy to be able to do this with you. It looks like we have a very full class this semester once again, and that's going to make for some very interesting discussions and comments, I think, in discussion boards and other sites around the Blackboard course. One of the things that happens with technology sometimes is that you run into some unexpected problems, and this has happened to me in this already. This year, I had this whole lecture recorded yesterday and went to play it back to make sure everything was okay, and discovered that I had muted my microphone about 10 minutes into the lecture. Now, after you've listened to me a few times, you may think to yourself, well, he had it right when he cut it off at 10 minutes because I'll be talking longer than that. But hopefully I'll be able to hold your interest at least longer than 10 minutes anyway as we go through this material together during the semester. This course is I've been teaching for the University of Alaska system for in excess of 25 years now. I think I have something like 64 semesters under my belt as an adjunct faculty. I've been working full-time in the social work profession until I retired about 3 years ago, and taught mostly at Kenai Peninsula College, the UAA Extension Campus in Kenai, in the classroom for much of that time for night classes. And each semester I would have probably on average 2 classes a semester. A few semesters I've taught 3 courses and still maintained another job full-time and was raising a kid at the same time by myself and running a household. I don't know how I did it exactly, but I did. Other times there's only been one course a semester, but it's really been a privilege for me to be able to teach and to share what I know about social work and human services and all of those kinds of things. So this was, I believe, the first class I taught in the UAA system back in probably 1989, 1990 at KPC. And I've probably presented this course now something like 25 or 30 different times, if not more than that. And so I guess you could say, my thinking along these lines have certainly been refined over the years, and I've actually found myself some of the attitudes that I have about social welfare programming and those kinds of things have really shifted over the years quite a bit, and largely because of my exposure to all the material in this course. So just a little bit about myself, and for those of you that have listened to this little monologue before, please forgive me, and I'll make it a quick trip through my history just so you know a little bit about why it is that I'm the person teaching this course. I have a bachelor's in social work from Michigan State University in 1974. Yes, that's a long time ago, I know. And a master's degree in social work from Florida State University in 1983. Not quite so long ago, but still long ago. Most of the years of my practice were spent in Alaska, and while I was in Alaska, I had a license as a clinical social worker. Since I retired in 2014 and moved out of Alaska, I've decided to let that license lapse now. So currently, I'm not licensed anywhere. Although I may wind up getting a license in Indiana and going back to work a little bit down here. I haven't really decided that just yet, but. In any event, the ACSW after my name is Academy of Certified Social Workers, and it's an NASW certification that I know something of what I'm doing. So take that for what it's worth. But I do have an MSW from Florida State University. I have worked in the social work field continuously since I got my bachelor's degree in 74, so that's over 40-some years of experience. The last few years of that I've been strictly involved in teaching, but prior to that time I spent 2 or 3 years fresh out of college working in public assistance and food stamp certification in Florida, then 4 years or so in child protection carrying a caseload in Central Florida, and then another 7 years or so working in children's residential treatment in Orlando at a facility called Great Oaks Village, and it has grown into a very large concern in Orange County, Florida. And at the time I worked there, I think when I left we had 128 beds on the main campus, and we had implemented some new programs on the campus while I was there. Originally, I was a caseworker in the treatment program they had there for ungovernable teenage boys and girls, but eventually was promoted to become the supervisor for the counselors across the entire campus in each of the different cottages. We had four cottages for boys and girls aged 6 to 18 who were removed from their homes and waiting foster home placement. And in addition to the behavior treatment program that I mentioned earlier, and over the years we added 2 cottages for teenagers who were removed from their homes that were designed to be long-term foster care, sort of like trying to design a home setting in a group environment, which is not easy to do necessarily, but to try to give those kids as normal an experience of being a teenager as possible while in placement there. The problem was at that time, and may still be the problem, is that it was very difficult to find foster homes for teenagers, and so we were hanging on to them in a shelter care environment longer than was healthy for them, and so we wanted to try to set up something where they would at least have some simulation of a normal life for a teenager. And we also had a semi-independent living program for boys and girls set up for older teenagers there to kind of prepare them to go out into the real world after they turned 18 and aged out of the system. So it was quite a concern down there, and I really enjoyed working. But Alaska called, and there I was in Kenai in 1987, and spent the next 7 or 8 years working as an outpatient mental health therapist there at the Central Peninsula Counseling Services. It's now PCHS in Kenai. And after that, another 19 years supervising child protection on the Kenai Peninsula, and really at different times during my employment there, supervising all aspects of child protection and child welfare, from the initial taking of a report of concern all the way through the adoption of children. So while most of my experience focused upon supervising child protection investigations themselves, I really was exposed to all the OCS, all the different OCS functions, I should say, during my time there. So after retirement, I decided it was time to get back closer to my family, and the rest of my family, I should say. And so here I am in Northeast Indiana now. And when if you call me, remember, I'm 4 hours ahead of you. So if you're working on a project at 10 o'clock at night, as I know many of my students do, please resist the urge to pick up the phone and ask me a question, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning down here. But you have my phone numbers there, you see. One of them is a cell, and that actually I still have my local Alaska cell for those of you that may not have a national calling plan, so that you can call me without incurring long distance charges, hopefully. The other phone is my hardline phone at home, and that's a Indiana phone number. Both of them have voicemail. Both of them are mine alone. No one shares my home with me, so any message you leave will be heard by me, and that's it. Oh, and my husky, but he doesn't tell anybody what he hears, so you can count on privacy there. Likewise, with my email addresses, the university does prefer that we communicate through the Google system that is set up with the university there, the EDU email addresses. I can tell you also, though, that I see my Comcast inbox more frequently than I see my Alaska inbox, and so please feel free to contact me through my Comcast.net email address as well. Once again, no one else sees that mail, and Comcast may be a little less secure as far as FERPA is concerned than the EDU system is, I'm assuming. But in any event, in terms of privacy at home, you can communicate with me in any of those methods, and it'll be fine. Also, I'm available if I have Apple products, and so if those of you that have Apple products, I'm available via FaceTime. If you ever want to have a face-to-face with me for some reason, I don't have Skype on my computer, but I can install it, and I'm Skypeable. I have a Facebook account, and you can message me through the Facebook video as well, which is really pretty interesting. Any of those methods I'm game for. So however you want to contact me, please feel free to do so. Okay, I guess that about covers that. So let's talk a little bit about the textbooks that you're going to be working out of in this course. This particular textbook is one that I actually used the very first time I taught the course way back when. It was the first edition at the time. And I've switched away from that once or twice just to try out some other textbooks, and I've always come back to this book because Phyllis Day, who's the primary author of this book, Jerome Scheel has joined on in the last edition or so, I think because Professor Day is probably becoming older now and needs some assistance with this. I don't know. Maybe she's totally retired from it, but she's the primary author, and you'll find pretty quickly when you read the book that she has a feminist perspective on things. Her writing has a way of stirring you up. It certainly did me the first few times I read the book, and I objected to some of the things she said, and I disagreed with some of the things she said. And as time's gone on, and I've thought more about what she says and read through this a little more carefully, I find that I agree with her pretty much 100% on most all of the things that she presents in the book. So if you find yourself being stirred up a little bit, it's kind of on purpose, because I think textbooks are a lot more interesting if they make you think instead of just something that just feeds you information. So you'll find that the course is designed around this textbook in that this presents social welfare across the ages, so to speak, all the way back to I think she even mentions something about the cavemen, but all the way to the modern day. And so it shows you how social welfare programming and social welfare policy and social welfare thought have evolved and developed over the course of the centuries. And of course, most of it focuses upon America. You get to the American colonial shores pretty early in the book, and we spend most of the time looking at the history of social welfare in the United States. And I think you'll learn some very interesting things along the way as you work through this book. The next book is also a textbook. It's smaller. It's and I use it as a sort of a secondary or ancillary book. This is So You Think I Drive a Cadillac, and this is the 4th edition of this book by Karen Seacom. Now, the interesting thing about this book, and you've probably already encountered this issue, is if you got a written copy of the book, you probably don't have a book with this cover on it, and it probably looks a little bit like a put-together workbook. And the publishers that took over this book in the 4th edition decided to make this an on-demand print book. So I think until it's ordered, it's not printed, and they're putting it together in what looks like kind of a homemade book. And it irritates me to no end, but that's the way they're doing it. And rest assured that what you get in that book is the full textbook and is the official textbook. What the publisher wants you to do is to buy the electronic edition and not the print edition. And personally, and just call me old and grumpy, but I love books, and even back in my college days, I liked having the books from my major and my profession on my shelves in my room, and I don't know. The new edition, the new generation is going to see all this very differently, and somehow or the electronic presentation of the book just doesn't do it for me. But you're free to do that as well. You get the full edition, I'm sure, there as just like you would if you had it in print. Now, this book looks at, instead of looking at a historical view, it's all kind of centered in the modern day, and it looks at the experience of social welfare recipients, and I think it will kind of bring to life the impact that all these thinking, all this policy, all these program changes have had over the decades and the centuries that you're going to read about in the Day textbook. You're going to see the impact of that on the day-to-day life of individuals today. And I think this is a very good book, and Seacom also looks at kind of the state of the world today as well, and looks at how social welfare has developed in so many other Western developed countries, and asks why we can't do something like that here ourselves. And I think she'll cause you to give some deep thought to that question. So this is the secondary book, and I do believe you'll enjoy this as well. Finally, many of you have read The Jungle in high school, I'm sure, and if you haven't, this book is about the experience of an immigrant family, I believe from Lithuania, who immigrates to the United States at the turn of the last century. The book was published in 1906, as you see. If you remember from American history courses around the early 1900s, there were a group of authors known as the muckrakers, who were the ones who were like trying to expose the ills of society and get people motivated to do something about it and change society. And Upton Sinclair is one of those muckrakers, and this is probably his most famous work, The Jungle. And Sinclair, you need to know, was a socialist. During this period of time when this book was published, socialism was really becoming popular around the globe. It was sort of becoming the new way of seeing politics and everything. And if you remember 1917, well, you won't remember. I mean, remember from your history books, 1917, the Bolsheviks overthrew the Tsar in Russia, and that was, I guess, kind of the pinnacle of the new socialist movement. But there was quite a movement of socialists in America during the late 1800s and the first couple decades in the 1900s. One of the more famous politicians was Eugene V. Debs, who ran for president a number of times, and he was an organizer and is a labor advocate, as I recall, and those kinds of things. And at one point he was put in prison, and some believe he was in prison because of his political views, because he was getting more and more votes in the election. I think people were worried that somehow the socialists were going to take over the government. Now, they never got anything more than, I think, 10 or 11% of the popular vote, but still that was pretty substantial for a third party. And he ran for president the last time when he was in prison. In fact, I think it was 1920. He was still in prison, and he ran against or ran for president that year. So, but that's an aside. The Jungle represents the thinking of the socialists during that period of time, and Sinclair tells you through his main characters, Jurgis and Ona and their family, how it is that capitalism took these people who came to America who wanted nothing but to be able to earn their way by working hard and to become successful, because that was the theory in America. If you work hard, you'll be successful. Wanted to show how the capitalist system uses and abuses those workers to the benefit of the owners and the wealthy. And that's a common theme, of course, that carries on into today. And so that insight, let's say, or whatever, is something which is still a very modern day issue. We hear about the 1%, the wealthy 1%, and that's who Jurgis is really struggling against in this book. And it's a very melodramatic book. It bogs down a little bit here and there, and I just ask you to push through the parts that seem to be moving slowly. Except that all these bad things could happen to one person. This is a novel, after all, so he's a compendium of a number of different people. I believe that, nonetheless, the experiences that Jurgis has in this book, in fact, are some of the experiences my own grandparents who immigrated from Hungary in the early 1900s, right around the time this book was published, in fact, with my infant father in their arms. Some of the experiences that Jurgis experiences here are the same kinds of things that my grandparents went through as they got established in America as well. So it's worth reading. The book also tells you what America was like 100 or so years ago when there were no social welfare programs, what America was like when the government did not intervene in the workplace in terms of protecting the consumer or protecting the employees. All these things have been put in place since the time this book was written. And in fact, Sinclair in this book is credited with some of the major changes that did occur during this period of time, because it opened the public's eyes to some of the things they weren't paying attention to. So you'll read this book, you do a paper, and we'll talk about this a little later on, but the paper in week 6, and then you can set the book aside. A question or two in one of your tests may come up from the Jungle, but it's not something that's going to be the focus of any of the tests during the rest of the semester. But it really is assigned at the time when in the Phyllis Day history timeline we're at the Progressive era, which is the early 1900s, and it's assigned to be read during that week, although you might want to get a head start reading it now. By the way, this book you can get online for free. If you get a book online or any book, make sure it's the unabridged and not the abridged version. Be sure you read the full book. If you buy a hard copy, a paperback version of the book, you can probably get them in a used bookstore for $0.25. I mean, they're everywhere. This book has been around for a long time, and a lot of people have read it. So the course syllabus is, I hope you have already found it in the Blackboard course. I want you to make sure you print out a copy of it and keep it on hand just so you can refer back to it. Read through the entire syllabus. If you have any questions, please be sure to let me know. You're responsible for the information that's in that syllabus, so that, just be aware of what's there and be sure that you have a copy of the syllabus on hand at all times. This tells you a little bit about how you go about earning points in this course. And there's a slide for each of these, so I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but just take a look here and you see that if you total up all these things, you've got 720 possible points to earn during the semester. It does not count bonus points, and I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute, but 720 points is 100% in this course. Now, one of the things I want to mention to you, Blackboard, the Grade Center has a way of giving you averages and where you stand. And I get an email every now and then from students kind of panic because Blackboard says they have a D, and they're really doing great in their course. And it's because Blackboard doesn't know that some of the assignments haven't been presented to you yet, those kinds of things. So all that's to say, don't worry about the percentage that Blackboard says you have. Just count up the points that you've earned if you're wondering where you stand. Count the points you've earned and compare it to the number of points you could have earned, and that will tell you where you stand in a course. Our grading scale is, I think, pretty much the standard grading scale around the university. 90% is an A, 80 to 90 is a B, and so on. One way you earn points is through participation in attendance. Now, how do you attend an online course? We don't have face-to-face meetings. We don't have any video conferences or anything like this. Well, you attend it by going into Blackboard, and Blackboard will tell me when you've been there, and give me the dates of your engagement in the course, so to speak, online. And I can tell through your contributions if you're participating or not, if you're thinking about things or not. Are you checking in with your group? Are you doing your discussion boards and journal entries every week? And are you doing them as much as you can? Fully doing them, those kinds of things. And so just kind of showing up and working in your course, you're going to get 50 points there if you do it all. Now, one of the things you're going to do every week, and if you read my introductory email, I talked about the need for you to keep up on this course every week. Now, those of you that maybe have had correspondence courses, have had classes where you kind of read the book and do the work and submit it at your leisure, and at the end of the semester, you get a grade back from your instructor, perhaps. That's not what this is about. This isn't really a correspondence course. This is an online e-learning, however you want to call it, course. And so you need to be engaged in this course throughout the semester regularly. And what I say in my introductory email is that you should consider you have flexibility because you don't have any meeting times in this class. You have the flexibility to do the work when you feel like it, but do the work within each week. So you'll find the new assignments open up very early Sunday mornings each week. And so beginning then until the time the new assignments show up very early the following Sunday morning, your goal should be to try to do all of the work within that week. And so whether you want to wait till Saturday and do it all on Saturday, or whether you want to spread it out during the week, that's entirely up to you. But try to get your work done each week within the week. And if you do that, you're going to get full credit for everything. If you participate and do the assignment properly, you're going to get full credit for things. If you turn in discussion board or journal posts late, those kinds of things, you'll probably lose some points because the discussion is going on in the present in your class, not, and if you make a post about a discussion that's 2 or 3 weeks old, a lot of people aren't going to see what you post, and it's not going to really be a discussion anymore. It's just going to be a comment that nobody sees except me, and so you're going to lose some points for that. So remember, your flexibility in this course is within each academic week, not throughout the whole semester. So discussion boards each week, and Sunday morning when the new week's course content opens up, you'll have a question posed to you. Now, before you get to the discussion board, if you work through the layout of the Blackboard course, you're going to see the assignments that you're supposed to read or watch, and you should do that. Then move on and listen to my lectures, and then the discussion boards present themselves, and those discussion boards usually will have one question each week. Occasionally there's a couple of questions. That's some of the extra, the bonus point opportunities. And you have a week to have, read and listen to the lectures, and then respond to the discussion board question with an original post of 150 words or more, at least 150 words. Now, that's not a lot of words. Really, it's a short paragraph. So you respond to the question with the original post, and then within a few days after that, you should go back into the course and read some of your classmates' posts and discuss what they say. Respond to their comments, and or respond to comments that students have made, your classmates have made to your post. Those kinds of things. That's why it's called a discussion board. I don't want you just going in and say, yeah, I agree, and I've seen some criticisms of discussion boards from students in other classes because that's all they have to do. And I'm looking for a real discussion here, not just kind of pro forma responses to get your 3 responses in so you get 10 points, because I want your responses to your classmates' posts to be substantial. Meaning the responses don't have to be 150 words, but they should be more than I agree or I disagree. It should be an explanation of why you agree or disagree, what you think about what the person said, whatever it might be, not just yes or no. Your original post should reflect that you've done the readings and that you've thought about those readings in the context of your answer. Again, don't. This is not a major thing, but I'm telling you, I'm looking for quality in these posts. I'm not just counting the number of times you respond to somebody. So the way this goes is the discussion questions will open up each week on a Sunday. Here's an example of this. You will find you have a week then to post your original response of 150 words or more. Within the next few days, by the following Thursday, you should respond to at least 2 classmates' posts, more if possible. And then the following weekend, that's when I'll usually grade the discussion board. So really from the time the question is presented, it's a couple of weeks before you begin to see a grade. But that's because I want to wait till everybody has had all their responses in before I grade the discussion boards. So your original post plus 2 responses will earn you up to 10 points each. When I say this is a public post, what I mean is that everybody in the class can read what you write. Now, people from outside the class cannot see what you're doing, but I can read it, of course, and so can your classmates. And every now and then there's a second discussion board question, and that's one of your opportunities to earn extra credit points. And it may only be 10 points, but later on in the semester, you may be wishing for that 10 points. So I encourage you to always respond to the extra credit when you have the opportunity. After the discussion boards, in your course lineup is what is referred to as the weekly e-scrapbook, and that is your journal. And this is a current events project. So what you're doing here is watching the papers, listening to the news, reading magazines, looking at journals, paying attention to what's going on around you, whatever it might be. But you should be looking at current events going on around you that relate to social welfare, civil rights, human rights, equality in society, those kinds of things, and then summarize that article. Now, if you go, so you're going to do a summary of what the news item is, and then a separate paragraph, your reaction or your response to that article of 150 words or more. Now, this is a private post between you and me. Other classmates don't see it. So this is sort of your opportunity to grab me by the arm during break and fill my ear about something each week. And that's kind of what this would be if we were doing this in a face-to-face classroom. Instead of having a discussion among the whole class, which the discussion boards are, this is you and me talking privately, kind of. And in discussion boards, I consider that to be the discussion boards, something among you guys. You're talking with each other about the topic. Now I'm monitoring and I'm reading those discussion board responses. Sometimes I will chime in on those discussion boards and put in my own comment, but do not expect me to be writing posts in every discussion board all the time, because I don't do that. That's really for you. I will occasionally post in discussion boards. On a journal, my goal is to respond to each of you each week in your journal response, because this is a private thing back and forth. And so use this opportunity, if you want, to become more personal in terms of the things you're posting, to comment more directly or more honestly, let's say, or something, that you maybe wouldn't want to say out in the classroom in general, but you want to say here, whatever that might be. And I'm going to make every effort to respond meaningfully each week. To be honest with you, I've got a big class here, and it's kind of hard to be deep and thoughtful 25 times, each week in a private post. And so forgive me if sometimes it seems a little superficial, but I'm going to try to respond directly to your comments every week in your journal. So you don't get any notice. Unlike discussion boards, you can set up so that you are notified when somebody makes a comment on your post. It's called subscribing to the discussion board. You don't have the opportunity to do that with your journal, so you really have to make an effort to go back in and look for my response to that, and then you can respond again. And I will watch for your response to show up and try to respond again if it's appropriate. Again, with the journals, it's a week or two after you post them before I have read them and have responded. So, give me a little bit of time to get in there. I tend to try to do the journals, some of the journals every day as the week goes on. So it's a little more, the grading there is a little more rapid than is with discussion boards. But just check back, and you should, when you see a grade on your journal, maybe that's your cue to go in and look and see what I had to say about what you posted. So 140 points for discussion boards, and actually there's 15 weeks of discussion boards, so there's an additional 10 points for a bonus there. So that's 140 points, and then you don't have a journal in week 1, so your journal entries begin week 2, and there are 14 journal entries, then each worth 10 points, so altogether 20 points between the two of those things, 280 points. You'll find a thorough description of how your post can earn points in this week's learning unit in the section entitled How Your Posts Will Earn Points. And also a permanent fixture in the course menu is an item called Board and Journal Grading Guidelines, and a lot of that information is repeated right there. Please read them thoroughly, because it tells you how to get your maximum points in both of those items, and in particular look for the example I have of a good journal post, because that's how I want it done, to cite your source, cite the date of the source, so that I can go back and look at it if I need to get more information, and then a brief paragraph summarizing what the issue is, what the article is about, and then your reaction of 150 words or more. So there's an excellent example of one of them in the Board and Journal Grading Guidelines, so please look at that and try to fashion your response to that. About the jungle. You read the paper by the end of week 6, and you'll turn in a paper 3 to 6 pages long. I think I put in the syllabus, I'm looking for, I think 1,500 to 2,500 words is kind of how the word count is on that. And if you use a kind of a standard font with a 1.5% or 1.5 spacing in between lines and things, you're going to get 3 to 6 pages. You don't have to worry about, if you want a double space or single space, that's fine. It's really the word count that I'll be looking at here. So try to comply with that. Now, this assignment will become available to you in the assignments link, probably somewhere around week 3 or week 4. You'll see it pop up there, and what you'll do is you'll type up your paper in a Word document and attach it in the assignments link to the section where you can do that. Don't type your paper directly into the assignments link itself. Okay, there's more instructions when the assignments link for the jungle appears in, I think it's week 4, so you'll see that. But a good summary, a full credit paper, is going to give me a brief summary of the book. It's going to describe your reaction to the book and tie it into course concepts that you have learned up to that point somehow. If you have any questions about that, you can let me know. The term research project is the, well, that's the big project for the semester. It's worth 150 points, as you see. And in this class, this is going to involve, your group will have 4 or 5 students in it, and half of you will be assigned to a yes or no position on a particular current controversial topic. Say, I'm going to just use the example of abortion. So half of you will be researching the reasons why people support the right to choose to have an abortion, and why the other half will be researching why people are opposed to that right and who believe that, life is sacrosanct, let's say, or whatever, and the baby shouldn't be aborted. You may have a very strong belief about, say, you're fervently pro-choice, but you get assigned to the pro-life position, as they refer to the opposite position. Understand that you're not writing about your opinion here, so don't be disturbed about this. You're researching the reason why the people who believe that, take that particular stance, believe it. So this means you need to dig into the literature and find out what people are using to support their beliefs in the various topics. If you disagree with that, think of the learning opportunity you're going to have to find out a little bit about why people come up with this other crazy idea. That so this is not intended to persuade the class one way or the other. This is supposed to be kind of a intellectual presentation of the basis for each position in the discussion, and then the reader can decide whether they agree or not. So this paper, I'm going to form the groups probably around week 4 or so. You'll get an email telling you that you've been assigned to a group, and you'll find that your group has its own sort of little work site there in Blackboard. It would be called your group project, I think, is what the link will be called. And within that link, you'll have discussion boards where you can communicate with each other. You'll have a file exchange where you can post things that you're finding on the internet about the topic, and where you can put rough drafts of your paper for each other to review. You have a task area where you can assign things to each other, those kinds of things. So and a discussion board where you can, your own discussion board where you can, back and forth kind of talk out things. I can see into your group, but no one else in the class aside from your group members can. So this is your private work site. In the end, you're going to put together one paper among the 4 or 5 of you. And this is where it comes in. The work comes in is dividing this up, and I suggest you do this early so that everybody knows what they're researching, and you can get after it, and research it. And the other thing is, pick a date to submit your paper by to each other. Your contributions to each other. Don't wait till the day before and everybody throw their contributions in, because this should be a paper that, part of the point you're going to earn is the paper integrated, or all the contributions kind of woven into one paper, instead of, I have 4 or 5 separate papers kind of attached together. I don't want that. I want a paper that presents the 2 positions, and you'll see specific instructions as to how to put this paper together in the an item on your menu that will be present at the time the paper is assigned. It says group project grading guidelines or something like that, and there's a lot of information in there about how I want you to put your paper together. This you might guess, if you've done this before, you know this, and if you haven't done this before, you might guess that this can be a bit of a headache sometimes. One of the things I'm going to do, one of the reasons I wait for a month to get this assigned, is because I want to see if there are students in there who aren't doing much in the class. And if I find students who are just kind of, not really working through material, I'm going to try to spread those students out among the groups so that one group isn't too heavily populated with 3 people who are kind of social loafers, But in the end, it's the responsibility in your group to get everybody engaged and working. It's people come to me and say, well, so-and-so isn't responding. I say, well, keep trying, or call them on the phone or whatever it is, and typically I don't take it as my responsibility to get people working on this project. It's your group's responsibility. Group work is something you're going to do in social work, and you're going to work with some groups that are like great and they have a good time working together. You're going to be in other groups, and trust me, I've been there, where people are at each other's throats all the time, and hopefully that won't be the case in this project for you, but it happens sometimes, and getting used to how you function in a group is something that's a very valuable skill in social work. And so this is practice on, not only is it a good intellectual exercise, it's practice on a very practice level in terms of working with other people who are professionals. So get ready for this, and get to work on it as soon as you're assigned. By the way, the paper that you're going to turn in is about 15 pages long altogether, so that's going to be 5,000 or 6,000 words. So it's a decent paper, but if 3 or 4 of you are contributing to that, it's not a huge assignment, even though it seems like it might be. Now, during the course of your work, between the time you're assigned to your group and the paper is submitted, you're going to be required to check in with your group in the group site in Blackboard twice. Now, I put that in red because I know that people pretty quickly, they start texting each other, or they maybe meet over coffee at Starbucks or something. If you're in Anchorage, if you can do that, that's great, and I encourage all of that. But I can't grade based on that. I only know you're talking to each other if I see your footprint in your group's site, and something that tells me that you're engaged. So usually the first footprint I'm looking for is somebody stepping in and saying, this is my name and my phone number, this is how you can reach me, bit text, this is my email address, how do we want to divide up this work? I mean, that's usually the first thing I look for in the first check-in. By the second check-in, I'm looking for some sign that you're working on it, and you're continuing to discuss things in your group. It still has a means to contact you. So it's really kind of up to you exactly how you check in, but I want to see you there in some substantial way. Each of those check-ins are worth up to 20 points, and so don't forget that, okay? And this is really intended to just make sure people are actually engaged in the project throughout and not waiting to the last minute. You procrastinators, pay attention, okay? And also, I will add, the other thing about these groups is there may be some procrastinators. There may also be some kind of OCD type people who just got to get things done right away and do everything right away, and and can't wait until the last week or anything like this. And I ask each of you to kind of be tolerant of the other and try to meet somewhere in the middle, though. Okay. After your papers are submitted, and you'll submit them in your group work site and in the file exchange, I will print out the paper, mark my comments. I'm one of these people that likes to make comments in your paper in handwriting, and then I give you a grade, and then I'll upload the paper back to you and put it back into your file exchange, and then you can all look at it and print out a copy of it with my comments if you want. I will also post a clean copy without any of my comments or without grades in a discussion board forum, and about 3 or 4 weeks before the end of the semester, shortly after the papers are submitted, you all will be reading each other's papers, everybody in the class, and participating in discussion boards about that paper. So this is your chance to learn from your classmates. It's also your chance to show your classmates what you found on your topic. So really, a lot of the students have said over the course of the semesters that these are, they come away from this class finally able to talk intelligently about some of these controversial topics. And so put in a good effort in this paper and give your classmates some good information that they can use. These are topics that we all need to be aware of in the social work field. They're controversial topics. They're not topics you probably want to talk about at cocktail parties, but they're topics that you should be aware of and paying attention to. More on that later. 2 tests during the semester, multiple choice questions each time. They come from a test bank that the authors have given me, and they are random questions, so everybody who's taking the test is getting a different test, but all from the same material, right? So you could be sitting next to somebody taking the test, and you still get you have different questions. That means you don't have to go to any place to take the test. You can take it right at your computer. It doesn't have to be proctored or monitored, but you have 11 days to complete that test. That means, well, week 7 and week 15 are when the tests are there. Week 7 on Thursday and week 15 on Thursday of that week, the test will open in your Blackboard course for the week, in your weekly course content. And you click on the link there, and it'll take you right to the test, and you can answer the test right there in Blackboard. And you'll get your grade back right away if you want. I mean, what your score was. Now, if you don't like your score, I have it set up so that you can go back and retake the test a second time. And the higher of your two scores will be the one that's recorded. Now, the test is also timed, and so I think the first one is 90 minutes, the second is 120, because there's more questions in the second test. And if you haven't finished the questions by the end of the time, the test will close, and that's your score, whatever you've answered. So, yes, obviously you can do this open book and open note, but if you haven't read the book, you're going to have a hard time knowing where to look for the answers. And so I really do encourage you to listen to lectures and read the books before you take the test. It'll help you a lot with the test, rest assured. So it'll open up on Thursday, week 7 and week 15, and then the test will be available in that course content for 11 days until 2 Sunday nights later after it opens. Then it closes. It will disappear from course content, and you will not be able to take the test again. So what I have to say is, be sure you don't miss the test closing date, because once it's closed, it isn't going to be available again. Additional discussion boards and weekly content will occasionally be there, I think 3 times during this semester. They're going to give you an opportunity to earn up to 30 points additional above the 720 points that are assigned. And again, I encourage you to take advantage of that each time it presents itself. Your Blackboard course, you may have noticed, opens to announcements. This is set up intentionally so that you will see all the announcements. Now, new announcements should appear at the top of the announcement feed. The old ones will stay there, so you can scroll down to see the old announcements. Every time I put in an announcement, you'll get an email in your university email account, or whatever is your preferred email address with the university. And please be sure you read them. They are important. Sometimes I'm sharing some information I got out there that's kind of apart from the material that you're assigned to read, but usually it's got something to do with something coming up or something you need to know. And this is sort of like me saying at the beginning of the class, I have something I need to tell everybody before we get started with the material. So check the announcements each week. Be sure that that you know what's in the announcement. And also, if you find an announcement that you're not getting an email about, that's probably a cue to you that there's something wrong with the university email address, and it is your responsibility to be checking your email accounts regularly and frequently. If I can't get a hold of you through there, I can't get a hold of you most of the time. And so you need to make sure that your university email address is functioning properly. Every now and then I'll get bounce back saying so-and-so email, this message didn't get through to so-and-so, and I really have no way of contacting you because your email's not working. So be sure you stay on top of this, and always read the announcements. The most important link in the course menu, as far as I'm concerned, is your weekly course content, and that's where all my teaching happens. So you'll notice that each week on Sunday morning at 12:05, for you people who like to work in the middle of the night, the new weekly content will open up, and you'll have everything in there that tells you what you have to do during the week, and all the material you need pretty much will be there. And so make sure that you read every slide every week. Your assignments are there. My lectures are there. Access the discussion board and journals are there. It is true that you can access discussion boards and journals in the course menu, but I do that only because I want you to have the opportunity to get there quickly if you're kind of going in to respond to another student's comments, perhaps, not so that you can shortcut and not pay attention to any of the course material for that week. So don't abuse the availability of that link, but you'll find those links in your weekly course content as well. This is what your weekly course content is going to look like generally, so you should make sure that you always see all of these slides. And Most of them you can just kind of click the next button and it'll take you to the next slide. But I think when you go to the discussion board link in your journal links, that takes you outside of the Blackboard course, and you may have to use the browser back button, your browser's back button, to get back into the Blackboard course. So don't think it's over with. If you go to do your discussion board and you're out of the class, you need to go back and to the next slide. And generally there is an opening and a closing slide, and if you've read the closing slide, then you've pretty much gone through all of them. But please do read the opening and closing slides, because those are things that I have personally written, and they tell you a little bit about what I want you thinking about when you go into this material this week, and also kind of give you some thoughts I have about trying to tie the material together and how this relates to our field and our work. Also in between, there's learning objectives for the week, which is something university wants me to spell out what you should be gaining through participation in this particular learning unit. Your reading assignments will be next, and sometimes you'll have some assignments to watch videos and things, and the links to those videos. You'll have weekly recorded lectures between 2 and 4. Now, they told us a long time ago when we were setting these courses up to try to keep not to make you sit and listen to one lecture over the course of 2.5 hours, but to break those lectures up into smaller segments. And so this is what I'm doing. And pretty much, I think with one exception where one chapter is broken into two, maybe there's 2 of those. For the most part, each lecture represents a chapter out of a book, something like that, that's been assigned for the week. You're going to find that the combination, even when there are 4 lectures in the course, if you total up all the time it's going to be spent listening to those lectures, it's probably going to be less than 2 3/4 hours every week. And that is the amount of time, 2 3/4 hours, is the amount of time you'd be sitting in a classroom listening to me babble on if we had a face-to-face class, right? Because that's what a 3-hour course is, essentially 2 3/4 hours in a classroom, and sometimes with a 15-minute break worked in there. So I remember my night classes at KPC were 7 to 9:45 all the time. So you're getting away with less than 2 3/4 hours of lectures. And please don't be mad at me that I'm not giving you a full 2 3/4 hours. But don't worry too much if there's 4 lectures. Usually they're shorter ones. There's a couple weeks where you're going to spend most of what you would be in class with me, but for the most part, you listen to the lectures, you're going to find it's probably less time than you need to be in class. Now remember, the lectures really are your class time, and if you were in class, you would still be expected to spend time outside of class doing your work, reading the books, watching the videos that I've assigned, whatever it might be. So it seems like a lot of work, but it's the work you would do if you were in a face-to-face class with me, and it's really no worse than that. It's just that you have to figure out how to do this on your own time this way, and it's really something that's, I think, pretty reasonable, all things considered. After my lectures, after you've listened to my lectures, then go into the discussion board, and that's kind of what the arrangement of these slides suggests to you. And if you click on the link, response to readings in the discussion board page, it takes you right to the forum. Use your back button on the browser to go back into the class. You'll have the journal link. Click on that link and you can put in your journal. Use your back button to go back to the course again. You'll find a slide with a copy of all my PowerPoint and Keynote lecture slides for the week. If you want to print them out for future reference, or just know where they are and when it comes time to study or whatever. And then finally the closing slide. Now sometimes there are other slides. For instance, the tests, when they become available, will open up in your Blackboard course there, right in the week's content. Sometimes I will have some other things that just are of interest that I add in there that are outside the normal content. But you can count on almost every week seeing at least these slides that are there in that outline. And so if you can't find them, you're not seeing the whole course. Keep that in mind. I'm wondering sometimes now anymore if we even need to do this Netiquette, little talk on Netiquette anymore, because there are some people that are taking the course that are kind of more my age, or approaching that age, who probably, computers and online communication is something that we've had to learn in the course of our lives, and you become familiar with, and so there are little ins and outs that we have to be reminded of. For the traditional college students that are taking this course, the 18 to 22-year-old group or so. You guys have probably grown up as what we call digital natives, so this stuff is probably a given for many of you, maybe not, but online communication has certain particular conveniences in that we can communicate. I mean, I have students from different countries sometimes, and other states in the union, and it's very interesting sometimes to interact with people from other settings that aren't right there in Anchorage or something like that. But also there's disadvantages, and one of them is that we don't get to see each other's body language, and we can't hear the tone of voice. We don't see if somebody's smiling or frowning. We can't see if they're making eye contact or not. We don't know if their arms and legs are crossed, or all those kinds of things. When we communicate face to face, those things on a subliminal level, perhaps a nonverbal level, communicate and give us the context and the meaning of the actual words that are being shared among people, so that sarcasm is much more easy to see in those situations. For instance, and words that may have been written in electronic communications very calmly and very respectfully somehow can come across being very angry and nasty to another person who just happens to be in a certain frame of mind, or might take things a little more personally than you might imagine. So all of that is to say, just be aware that we don't have those things when we're communicating online, and so that means, read what you've written and make sure that it isn't something that is clumsy enough to really stir people up and get people angry or offend people. And it isn't so much about angering other people as it is offending people. That doesn't mean that we have to be always politically correct. Sometimes we're going to say things that maybe does stir some things up with people, but always be respectful of other people's feelings. Know that your class is made up of people who come from all walks of life. They're all ages, they're all body types, they're all races, they're all political persuasions, they're all religious persuasions, those kinds of things. Keep all of this in mind, and know that we're here to talk about these topics together in a way that is a safe environment, and where we can educate each other. And I say that because I believe you all are involved in the education of each other just as much as I am. So please stay respectful. Try to be as clear as possible with what you write. Remember, other people have feelings. If somebody says something that's offensive to you or something like that, first of all, try to forgive the person and assume that person didn't intend it to be the certain way that it came across. Secondly, if you can communicate with that person, go ahead and do that. If you see somebody is being abusive, sexually aggressive, sexually suggestive, whatever it might be, harassing you in any way, and you should let me know, and I'll deal with that student, or with the university in dealing with that student as is appropriate. Title IX does protect you from any kind of sexual harassment, and that has all sorts of different kinds of implications about the way we communicate with each other. So please practice good rules of netiquette. Now, this week you do have a discussion board. You don't have a journal, but you do have a discussion board, and you're going to write a post of about 150 words that really tells us about who you are. It's kind of an icebreaker for you. It gives us an opportunity to learn who's in the class and what you're all about. I like to tell people, not only with this post, but any post, please feel free to post photographs, and you don't have to. It's not required, of course, but those kinds of visual things sometimes make our discussion boards and our journals a lot more interesting, so please feel free to post photos, so particularly this week. It doesn't have to be of you. It can be of your dog. It can be of your cat, your house, your friends, places you've been, your family, however, whatever you want to do. You don't have to post a picture, but you should feel free. And here's some suggestions about what you might write about. In the week ahead, watch the news for current events related to social welfare or civil rights. Some examples I have listed here again, social programming, the budget, education, racism, sexism, civil rights, immigration, healthcare reform, same-sex marriage, gay and lesbian rights. These are all things that are all over the media, and particularly in the modern day with our current administration, it seems sometimes as though our leaders stir these issues up intentionally, and certainly does cause a lot of interesting discussion around, well, all sorts of places. I noticed, and interestingly, I like Facebook. It's interesting to me that the posts that are made, the political posts, some people are just obsessed with one particular point of view, and they keep posting, for instance, about our president, all the things that are opposed to him they can find. Others are like, standing firm and posting all the pro-president things that they can find. And every now and then, somebody throws out what I like to call a little grenade out into my feed, that just seems to be intentionally intended to stir people up. And, you want to see the responses of everybody. There's no discussion going on there. It's really just kind of slapping each other around with our views, and Facebook really has the potential. Social media has the potential for us to be able to share our thoughts and to think about them with each other. But no one in Facebook seems to want to absorb what other people are saying when they're opposed. They just want to oppose people, and so. Our discussion boards, when we touch on these classes, these issues, maybe an opportunity for you to actually engage in some open conversation where we consider other people's thoughts and feelings and opinions as well, in a measured and respectful way. So anyway, your first journal entry, your e-scrapbook, your weekly e-scrapbook, won't be due until week 2, so you won't find one this week. Also, the final slide here, you read Phyllis Day. In chapter 1 in particular, she writes about the 9 American values, and please pay attention to them in particular and try to understand what she's saying and what they represent, because these values are going to come back in our discussions throughout the semester, and she'll be referring back to them as well, and they're very important. What she says is these are things that anybody who's been raised an American believes. Now, there may be some of those values, I know there certainly are for me, that I object to, by the way that they're presented. Intellectually, I've separated myself from those values. But what Day is saying is that as an American, we're all kind of born into a belief system that includes these values. And maybe our experiences change our thinking on them, but in the fabric of our being, these values and these beliefs are there. And so, it's just something for us to be aware of and consider how your own attitudes and beliefs either reflect those values or don't reflect those values. But anyway, as I say here, it's a foundation concept. We'll be referring back to it throughout the semester. So pay attention to that in particular. And so that's it for this week. I babbled on a little longer than the original lecture, which I accidentally deleted, but it looks like we got through this one successfully. So I hope that you found some value to this, and please let me know if there's any questions. Again, contact me. Probably the best way to contact me is via email, but you have lots of different ways to contact me if you wish. So with that, I'll sign off for this week, and we'll talk again next week. Thanks very much, and take care.